Okay, Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Welcome to our session. We'll be recording this session for Al-Mawrid, Canada. And we are pleased and honored that we are joined by Dr. Shoaib Ahmed Malik. Dr. Shoaib Ahmed Malik is an assistant professor of natural sciences at Zayed University, Dubai. He researches exclusively on topics of science and religion, atheism, and Islamic theology. He is the author of Atheism and Islam, a Contemporary Discourse, published in 2018, and has book chapters and articles with various publishers and journals. Today, he'll be discussing with us his book, Islam and Evolution, from a Ghazalian perspective. I'll quickly show the cover of that book for reference of the audience so that they can, if they want to take note down the name, they can note it down. And with that, I'll quickly also introduce the discussion panel today that we have with us. And I've gathered some relevant people from Al-Mawrid who will be helping me discuss this topic. So I'm joined by Dr. Junaid Hassan, who's associated with Al-Mawrid as a researcher and has written a book on God, biology, and new physics. And he is currently working on the topic of evolution from the point of view of Quran. I'm also joined by Ahmed Shoaib. Ahmed Shoaib has been assisting Dr. Junaid on developing this Quranic understanding of evolution. I'm joined by Dr. Danish Hamid, who is a philosopher and will look at the issues more from a philosophical angle. I'm also joined by Mushfiq Sultan, who is a researcher with Al-Mawrid with interest in diverse subjects, and I'll be the host. So over to you, Dr. Shoaib. I'm adding the presentation stream, and you can take it away from there.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to your institution and with this panel to present my book. I'm still feeling a little bit under the weather, but inshallah I hope to have a good conversation with all of you. So as mentioned by Raza Bhai, that I've been looking at broadly the topic of Islam and science, but for the past 8 years now, I've mostly been focusing on the question of evolution. As most of you know, this is a very sensitive conversation, and in my experience, I wanted to see why this was such an issue. So I actually left the field of engineering. I'm formally trained as an engineer. I finished my PhD in 2014. Since then, I left, and I am now specifically just researching on Islamic theology and philosophy. Since then, 2014, I've been studying with Shuyukh and trying to create an interface of Islam and science. In 2021, I published this book, which has received a lot of attention in a positive and constructive way. And I hope to share the findings of this book with you here today, inshallah, and to learn from you as well what you think works and doesn't work from your perspective. So to make sense of this conversation and to make it accessible for everybody, I would like to divide my presentation into two parts. The first part is the science of evolution. So when I talk about evolution, usually there is a colloquial understanding or a non-science. I'd like to divide my presentation into two parts. The first part is the scientific part, just to quickly review what the science of evolution says. And I make sure I do this because I want to clarify what I mean by the scientific understanding of evolution. For a lot of people, evolution means or has connotations of non-scientific attributes, and I want to clarify that before we actually talk about Islam and evolution. Once the science is clarified, then we can go on to talking about its impact on Islamic thought. I also want to make it clear that evolution is a sensitive discussion, and my job here is not to convince any of you. I'm not trying to tell you evolution is correct, nor am I trying to tell you evolution is wrong. All I'm doing in this presentation is explaining to you that these are options on the table. If you want to entertain them, feel free to discard them. I'm aware that for a lot of people, naturally, evolution is very sensitive, close to heart. But I want to at least critically move away from a false bifurcation that's presented when it comes to Islam and evolution. So people usually see one of two options. You either see people believing in Islam and then to reject evolution, or believe in evolution but then they reject Islam. People like Richard Dawkins, they kind of make this narrative very public that you can be a religious person or you can be an evolutionist, but you cannot be both of them. I'd like to break away from this binary and show people that there are options on the table, and hopefully that'll give you something to think about. So, Bismillah, let's start with the basic theory of evolution. So, as somebody who's been teaching now Islam and evolution, I even have a textbook coming out next year, which is hopefully written for the madrasa community, as well as for the university community. This will be coming out next year. It's open access as well, yani free to download. I have come up with a recipe that I think works very well with a lot of different audiences, be it in India, Pakistan, the Arab world, the West. It works very well. If you understand these three propositions of evolution, khalas, evolution is crystal clear in you. Everything else is just scientific details that we don't need to worry about. The three basic propositions of evolution are these: deep time, common ancestry, and causal mechanisms. If you understand this, you've understood evolution, and that is enough to start the theological conversation. So what are the three propositions that make up evolution? The first very basic idea of evolution is that the Earth is much, much older than we originally thought. Previously, before modern physics, particularly radioactivity, we were under the impression, due to biblical records, that the Earth is around 6 to 10,000 years old. That all of creation was around 6 to 10,000 years old. And this was based on how some people interpret the Bible. They were able to measure the lineage of the prophets and they stretched it back. And James Ussher, he was the one who calculated a 10,000-year-old narrative. Once physics came on board, particularly in the early part of the 20th century, radioactivity allowed us to push that narrative further back. Our estimates are now the universe is around 14 billion years old. So you see the left column, those are the absolute raw values. Earth is around 4.6 billion years old. We had our first life forms around 3.5 billion years old, and so on and so forth, right? To make it easier for people to digest these numbers, because when I say 14 billion, it's not really clear what you mean by that, right? So I converted the left column into seconds. Imagine if that's 14 billion seconds. Imagine that's 4.6 billion seconds. So if the universe was created around 450 years ago, taqriban, as an appreciable estimate, the Prophet ﷺ was born 23 minutes ago. That's how long the time duration is of our universe. It's significantly older than we thought originally. So the first principle of evolution is deep time. The Earth is really, really, really old, significantly older than we thought previously. The second principle of evolution is this idea of common ancestry, salaf al-mushtarik. So all of us here have mothers and fathers. They have mothers and fathers, and they have mothers and fathers. And if we put all of this in a diagram, we get a family tree. Yeah? And we put these decorations in our houses all the time. The family tree tells us who is succeeding, which generation is coming after, which one is coming before. Evolution takes the same idea, but instead of individuals, it talks about this for species. Evolution says that all biological life, humans, cats, dogs, dinosaurs, whatever have you, everything since the origins of life, all of us are connected in this massive family tree. And this family tree spans 3.5 billion years, right? And so you can see from this diagram, there's the human species, that we are one product of this family tree. Now, I want to clarify one thing, because some people get this point confused. There is a difference between the origins of life and the origins of species. Asl haya, or the origins of life, is the study of abiogenesis. How did life, the first life form, originate? How did the first protein cellular assembly originate? That is not the domain of evolution. Evolution doesn't explain that. Evolution explains the origin of species. That's why Charles Darwin's book, which he first pronounced in 1859, his book is called Origins of Species. Evolution is a study of, once life originates, how does it diversify into different species? So to make this clear, this is common ancestry. There is the origins of life at the bottom. That's the starting point of life. Evolution explains everything in blue. It does not explain the red. So it's very important to highlight the difference between origins of life, origins of species. Evolution explains origins of species. It does not explain origins of life. I clarify this because a lot of people think that there's no explanation for origins of life, therefore evolution is debunked, but that's not the realm of evolution to begin with. So those are the first two propositions. We covered deep time and we covered common ancestry. So we finished the first two principles of evolution, deep time and common ancestry. The third principle of evolution are the mechanisms. So how does evolution work? There are two parts to this. The first part is called random mutation. So here you have a picture of a human being. A human being can be divided into organs, and organs is made out of cells. And cells, every cell in the body has the DNA. The DNA is the fundamental biological entity. It codifies our behavior, our dispositions, and our physical outlook. So I have genetic material in me that gives me brown hair, facial hair. To some extent, it codes my height, my genetic disease predispositions, if I have any. All of those are governed by the DNA. Now, what happens is when you have a mother and a father, or a male and a female, and they procreate, there are genes that mix up. Some come from the mother, some come from the father. And during this process, you have offspring. Now, the way the genes mix up is based on probability and mutations. So, from one generation to another, some of the DNA mutates in the mixing process. That's why you can have kids that are sometimes like the father, sometimes like the mother, sometimes like a mix, sometimes neither, depending on how the genes mix up. So that's why if the same couple have multiple kids, you will see variations in the kids because of this mutation process aspect to them. Now, mutations occur for a variety of reasons, but mutations can be beneficial, harmful, or neutral. And it depends from one mutation to another to see the output of that in the physical level of things. So random mutations is a fundamental part of the reproductive process, as well as evolutionary mechanism as a whole. But this is just one part of the story. The second part of evolutionary processes is called natural selection. Again, it looks like it's a very complicated idea. It's really not. Natural selection is the simple point of showing that when you have species in a given environment, they must adapt to that environment, otherwise they will die off. So starting from the left diagram, you have a population of mice, and the landscape they're in is dark. Now, some of the mice are dark colored, some of the mice are white colored. You have a predator. The predator is feeding off the mice. Now, of course, in this environment, it can easily see the white mice. That's why over time, what's happening is the white mice are reducing in population size because it is less valued for survival. If you're white colored, most likely you'll be picked off by the predator. The remaining mice, they have a survival value because they are able to camouflage in the environment. That's why the color of black mice increases over time. This is basic natural selection, where nature acts like a filter. If you're able to adapt, you survive and you move on. If not, you will die out. So a combination of these three principles in place is what makes up the theory of evolution. Deep time, common ancestry, and the mechanisms are random mutations and natural selection. If you've understood this, khalas, you have understood basic evolution. Everything else is scientific detail. Everything else is just scientific. But this is enough to start the theological conversation. Now, there are a few things I want to clarify just to give you some example. So some people say, how do you know evolution occurred? We have not seen it. Human beings cannot observe 3.5 billion years. So how do we know that? Well, there are many different evidences which you can find in a textbook. One very good example as an illustration is according to the theory of evolution, life started off and then we first, had fish, sea-like creatures. Eventually they moved onto land and then we got various land species. There was a prediction about an animal that would have the properties of both fish-like qualities as well as land-like qualities. And that's what they found. They found the Tiktaalik. The Tiktaalik is referred to as an intermediate species of sorts that was able to have breathing capabilities outside of water, but also able to swim in water as well. And this is one of several kinds of discoveries which match with our prediction of the fossil record. So in the fossil record is the Earth has many layers, and as we dig down, we are able to uncover fossils and a bunch of things. The earlier the layer, the closest to us, the further we go in the depths of the Earth, the further back in time we go. And that gives us a visual history of the entire biological kingdom that ever existed. Now, when it comes to human beings, this is the key question. We have always been told, according to Islam, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam alayhi salam miraculously, and all of us come from Adam and Eve. Here. Now, where do humans fit into this narrative in evolution? In this particular conversation, so I want you to imagine the common ancestry, but flipped 90 degrees. According to the theory of evolution, about 7 million years ago, we had an ancestor with chimps. And there were two lineages that kind of sprouted out. One lineage led up to human beings, Homo sapiens today. Another lineage led up to chimpanzees. And how do we actually know this? This is because of genetic data. So here we have the common ancestor. The prediction is around 7 million years ago. This is hominins. Hominins is a species that came out after the split. I've just translated it as ashbah al-bashar, right? You can call it bashar if you want, whatever works for you. But this is what we classify. So Homo sapiens are here. We have Neanderthals, we have Denisovans, and these were entities that looked very similar to us. Neanderthals, for example, they used to bury their dead. We have genetic records that Homo sapiens used to mate with Neanderthals. Homo sapiens had relationships with Denisovans. These are established in the genetic record. And so how do we know that human beings were close to chimpanzees? What is the evidence for that? Well, it's the genetic data. So at the bottom, you will see chromosomes. Chromosomes are your sex cells that get passed on from one generation to another. In chimpanzees, they have two chromosomes called 2A and 2B. In human beings, we have 23 chromosomes. What happened was, as this lineage was evolving, these two fused in our lineage. 2A and 2B became 2. But the rest are almost identical. Like when you compare all the chromosomes together and match them up, this is a 96% quantitative similarity. Now, don't assume that these are 23 things. Each chromosome has billions of data points. So this is a very, very highly corroborative explanation. 96% genetic similarity. Primarily the only difference being the two-way split. So that is one key evidence that we have genetic ancestry. We have ancestry with chimpanzees. Another evidence, for genetic similarity with chimpanzees is endogenous retroviruses. Long story short, and to keep this simple, endogenous retroviruses are viruses that can structurally affect your DNA. So let's say, for example, an ERV hits my body. There's a change in my DNA. Now, whenever I have children, all of my offspring will have that same marker, the same genetic change in me. Now, humans and chimpanzees have not but one, but several ERVs that are in the exact same location. To say that independently human beings and chimpanzees got the same virus independently is mathematically improbable. The more likely explanation is there was a common ancestor of both. They had the ERVs and these got passed down through the lineage. So from a biological standpoint, the corroboration that human beings are biologically linked with the rest of the biological kingdom is sufficiently strong. Now, I'm not trying to convince you that this is true or not. That's not my prerogative. That is your prerogative. You can accept the evidence or not. For the sake of the argument, let's say it's true. As a shart, let's say evolution is true. What impact does it now have for Muslims? And now I begin the the theological conversation. Now, in my analysis, I want to make sure this is crystal clear the key contention that we have in Islamic thought is pretty much the creation of Adam and Hawa alayhi salam. Those are the two things. The creation of non-human beings, animals, and plants. The Quran doesn't mention anything specific here and there, right? But the account of Adam and Eve is quite firm. It's quite established in the Quran. So a summary of the thing is Adam alayhi salam was created by God. Angels prostrate to Adam alayhi salam, except for Iblis. Adam and Eve were sent to the garden. They were told not to eat from the tree. They asked for forgiveness, and then they were removed from the garden and sent to the earth. This is a standard narrative, right? There's some ikhtilaf here and there. For example, where's the garden? Fis sama, fil ard. All of those are open, discussion points. But that's the general narrative. And there are a sufficient number of ahadith and ayat that explain this. One key verse is in Surah Nisa. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها وزوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء. So very crystal clear, that all of us, we created from a single individual. From it, the partner came, and then from that pair, many men and women came about. One verse that kind of really articulates that, Adam alayhi salam is a miraculous being is this one in Surah Imran. إِنَّ مَثَلَ عِيسَى عِنْدَ اللَّهِ كَمَثَلَ آدَمَ خَلَقَهُ مِنْ تُرَابٍ. So, from Allah's perspective, Jesus is just like Adam. He created him from dust. So the sabab of this is when the Prophet ﷺ, he was giving da'wah to two Christians from Najran, and he said, you don't want to believe in Islam because you believe Jesus is divine, because he was born without a father. This verse then came down. And for centuries, Muslims interpret this verse to indicate that if you believe that Jesus is divine because he was born without a father, well, here we have an individual, Adam alayhi salam, that was born without a mother and without a father. So he should be more divine than your Jesus, right? So these verses, along with several ahadith, they are used as indicative that Adam alayhi salam was a miraculous creation, Hawa alayhi salam was a miraculous creation, and all of us come from these two characters. This is something that's quite firmly established from the Quran Hadith. Now, in my opinion, when I was looking at the literature, so I looked at various opinions, right, in Arabic, in Urdu, in English, to see exactly, even in Turkish, some books that were translated into English. I don't speak Turkish, but there are some books that were translated to English. And for me, what became very clear was that having a classification that is representative is very important. And I developed this classification to make sense of all the positions that are out there. Fundamentally, the main problem is common ancestry. What is and isn't a product of evolution? I use that as my primary method of classifying all the positions that are out there. And I ask just three questions. Are non-humans product of evolution? Are humans a product of evolution? Are Adam and Eve products of evolution? These are the three questions. And there are four positions that I crafted. The first position is known as creationism. Creationism is this idea that the common ancestry idea is false. There is no such thing that, we're all biologically linked. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created each species directly, instantaneously, miraculously. Khalas, finish. So here, common ancestry does not exist. By contrast, the no exceptions position, this is the position where everything is a product of common ancestry. Adam alayhi salam and Hawa alayhi salam included. So here, they don't tolerate miracles, largely speaking. Now, all these positions are by Muslims. I want to clarify that. I forgot to say. So yeah, I'm referring to Adam, where you can see that circle Adam. You can see that he is responsible for the creation of Homo sapiens, but he has no interconnection with what existed before him. Nothing. So here, humans, the entire category of humans, is excluded. This has no connection with anything in common ancestry whatsoever. This is human exceptionism. Now, Adamic exceptionism is the third position, and Adamic exceptionism maintains the same thing. It maintains that Adam alayhi salam was a miraculous being. Hawa alayhi salam was a miraculous being. Together, they form the motherhood and fatherhood for all of us today, every one of us. However, Adamic exceptionalism does not deny the possibility of there being entities alongside Adam alayhi salam when he's created on earth, with whom interbreeding could have taken place with. So what do I mean by that? So this position relies on an aqidah principle called tawaqquf. When we have something that is binding on us creedally, theologically speaking, we need something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through sam'iyyat, through revelation. Now, Allah sometimes tells us things about ilm al-ghayb, the things that are unseen, knowledge of the unseen. To have belief in the knowledge of the unseen, Allah needs to declare something or negate something. For example, Allah SWT tells us about angels in the Quran. It is now mandatory upon us as Muslims to believe in angels. Allah SWT tells us about heaven and hell in the Quran. It is mandatory upon us as Muslims to believe in heaven and hell. That is because it is in sam'iyyat, in revelation, right? Similarly here, Adam alayhi salam is discussed, Musa alayhi salam is discussed, Nuh alayhi salam. All those are individuals that Muslims are required to believe in, right? However, Adamic exceptions says, that's all clear. But the Quran mentions nothing about what coexisted at the time of Adam alayhi salam. We don't know when he existed. We don't know what coexisted at the time. And we don't know what kind of relationship Adam's descendants could have had with these other things that were existing. So, how does this look like visually? Like this. So the picture is exactly the same. If you see here, this is human exceptionalism. This is now Adamic exceptionalism. Adam alayhi salam could have been created, we don't know when. Could have been created 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, 50,000, 100,000, we don't know. We have zero scriptural reference. Whenever he was created miraculously, there is nothing in the Quran and Hadith to deny nor affirm the possibility of Adam's descendants interbreeding with other things that were out there. Nothing in the Quran Hadith. Now, why is this possibility even being entertained? Because then this would show some kind of corroboration with the genetics that we see in the evolutionary record. So these are the four positions that I will be using when I am now presenting my own analysis. I haven't said which one of these I believe in. I'm just telling you, these are the four positions that you can find in the literature. You will have Muslims espousing creationism. You will have Muslims espousing human exceptionalism, Adamic exception, and no exceptions. So these are the four positions. And I hope that those four positions are clear. Now, when I approach the conversation, being an engineer, I like to classify things because otherwise things don't make sense to me, right? In Islam, it's a fact that we have theological camps, right? Just like we have fiqh camps, we have theological camps. Broadly speaking, we have Sunni brothers and sisters, we have Shi'i brothers and sisters, okay? I personally identify as a Sunni Muslim. That is my madhab, okay? And I say that unapologetically. I just that is what I identify as. In Sunni Islam, you have three theological schools. You have the Ashari school, the Maturidi school, the Athari school. Athari, Salafi, whatever name you want to give the third one. Okay? And I identify as an Ash'ari. This is my personal position. I am an Ash'ari. And so within that theological school, I want to see exactly what can I accept as a Muslim and what can I not accept as a Muslim. So I choose Imam Ghazali as my representative because within each school you have multiple figures, right? So in Ash'ari school you have Abu Hassan al-Ash'ari, Baqalani, Jawaini, etc. I focused on Imam Ghazali. Okay? Why do I focus on Imam Ghazali? Mostly because I personally was very inspired and influenced by him. One of my first exposures to Islamic studies was actually about Imam Ghazali, his Ihya Ulumuddin. I find him to be a very balanced scholar. And so I was very drawn to his works. I was very drawn. On top of that, he is a revered scholar, not just in the university, but also in the madaris. And in madrasas, you will find people studying Imam Ghazali. His Ihya, his Iqtisad, his Mustasfa, a bunch of things. Now, Imam Ghazali wrote many books and he wore many hats, right? Sometimes he's writing as a faqih in Mustasfa. Sometimes he's writing as a Sufi, which you can find maybe in his Ihya. Sometimes he's writing as a mutakallim, his Iqtisad. So I mostly look at the tahafud and the iqtisad to draw out his ilm al-kalam, his kalamic framework, his aqidah framework, and I use that to navigate the conversation of Islam and evolution. This is the paradigm that I adopt. Why am I making this explicit? Because I believe you cannot divorce your theology from the conversation. When you say this is my stance as a Muslim, my first question is, which Muslim stance are you talking about? Are you Sunni, Shi'i, are you Ashari? For me, these are important. So that's why I make it crystal clear that I am talking from an Ash'ari perspective. However, the conclusions that I reached do not mean that it is only for the Ash'ari madhab. They are equally applicable, in my opinion, to the Maturidi and the Athari perspective as well. They are equally applicable. But I just want to make my background crystal clear to everybody. Now, with the theological background made clear, there are two questions that we need to ask of ourselves. Okay? The first question is, these four positions that we've highlighted, are these even metaphysically possible? Yani, is it possible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to create us through these ways? Is it even possible? Because some people reject evolution because they believe Allah cannot even create us through evolution. What kind of Allah created us through random mutation? Kaisi baat hai? What is that? Astaghfirullah al-Azim. Okay? So we have to ask ourselves these two questions. One, is it metaphysically possible? Two, is it scripturally compatible? And if both of these are passed, then we can accept these positions. And this is the way I navigate any science or religion discussion. Okay? So let's start with metaphysics. What do the Ash'aris believe from a creedal perspective? So fundamentally, in the Ash'ari school of thought, and I know that some of these might be, I'm not sure the people who are watching, how well they're familiar with theology, but largely speaking, relevant for any science stuff, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is known as wajib al-wujud. He is the necessary being, and all of creation is min al-mumkin wal-wujud. So Allah, creation is fil imkan. It's from imkan, right? And the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala controls us is through the model known as occasionalism. And the fundamental thing is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do anything that is jaiz aqlan for us. So as long as something is logically conceivable, it doesn't reach to a contradiction, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do it. So can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us fly without any scientific intervention? Yes. Ash'aris believe that, no problem whatsoever. Can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cut the universe in half and put it back together? Yes, it's jaiz aqlan. Logically, it's possible. Can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala split the seas and put it back together? Yes, no problem whatsoever. So basically, the Ash'ari madhab makes it crystal clear that everything is under the control and power and will of God. That's it. So it's a very, very radically contingent system. Now, what does this mean and what implication does it have for these four positions? Can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create us to creationism? Yes. Can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create us to human exceptionism? Yes. Can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create us to Adamic exceptionism? Yes. And can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create us to no exceptions? Yes. All four positions are jaiz from an Ash'ari madhab. All are jaiz. Now this is significant because why? Many people think that atheism, evolution equals atheism. But how does it equal atheism when we just said that all four positions are possible for God to create us with? So the reason why people confuse evolution for atheism is because they think that natural selection means naturalism. Naturalism is a philosophical position. And atheists like Richard Dawkins, they put evolution in an atheistic framework and they package it to you this way. But evolution does not need to be in an atheistic metaphysics. It can be an atheistic metaphysics entirely. Furthermore, many people think that random mutations means there is no purpose. Just like we have a coin toss, when I toss a coin, I don't know whether something will be heads or tails. I don't know. The same way, when we have genes combining and they're mutating, we cannot predict which gene is going to mutate. We cannot do that. We don't have the apparatus to do that. We don't have the information. Random mutation means that sometimes mutations will occur which will lead to those variations from offspring one generation to another. But it doesn't mean Allah doesn't know what He's doing. Just like Allah knows the coin toss, Allah knows the gene mutations that are occurring. So mutations can mean there is no purpose only if you adopt naturalism, that nature is all there is. And unfortunately, this is the worldview which people like Richard Dawkins espouse. People like Richard Dawkins. And they present evolution through this way. Whereas from an Islamic standpoint, we don't need to accept the metaphysics. We can accept the science without the metaphysics of atheism. Second thing, the reason why this is an important thing to conclude is because there are other systems in Islamic thought. For example, Neoplatonism, Ibn Sina's worldview, Ibn Rushd's worldview, where evolution is not possible because of various metaphysical commitments that they have, right? Sayyid Hussein Nasr, he adopts Neoplatonism, the scheme of Ibn Sina, and even Mullah Sadra, and through which evolution is not possible. And that's why he said evolution is kufr. That's why he doesn't believe in evolution. But from an Ashari madhab, it's perfectly possible. And Allah SWT can do evolution no problem whatsoever. So from a metaphysical angle, all four possibilities are jaiz. All of them are jaiz. All of them are absolutely possible with respect to the power of Allah. The next question is the hermeneutics. Are those four positions scripturally compatible? Now, Ghazali has his hermeneutics buried in a lot of places, so I stitched it all together. These are the main principles that I use. I'm not going to go through each of them in detail. But for an aqidah commitment, for something that has to be bound by theology, you need something that is qat'i dalala wa qat'i thubut. Something that is historically robust, it's mutawatir. And then the dalala, it's unambiguous. There should be no other possible interpretation, right? So it has a very high benchmark for aqidah. 2, scripture possibilities are measured through metaphysical possibilities. Ash'aris believe in the possibility of miracles. Also, Allah SWT can do miracles, no problem. That's why Ash'aris have no problem believing in miracles. There are some Muslims who don't believe in miracles. That's why they interpret things like the story of Adam alayhi salam and Hawa alayhi salam as stories. They're just metaphors. They're majazi. Right? Number 3, you take the zahiri meaning, the obvious meaning, until the qarina or the Arabic allows you to do so. That is basic axiom of usul al-tafsir. Basic, right? And it's because of these mu'jizat are acceptable in the Ash'ari madhab as well as the other Sunni and Shi'i madhabs. This is not discussed or debated generally. Number 4, as I said to you before, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us information about ilm al-ghayb. Ilm al-ghayb is about the unseen. And there are 3 possibilities about the ilm al-ghayb. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala affirms some things from ilm al-ghayb. For example, an idea that there is a character called Adam alayhi salam. We are now committed to the individual that there is a character called Adam alayhi salam. There is an individual called Musa alayhi salam. If Allah SWT never mentioned Adam, we would not have a creedal belief in Adam alayhi salam. We are not required to believe in an individual called Adam. If Allah SWT never mentioned Musa alayhi salam, khalas, we don't have any aqidah commitment to believe in Musa alayhi salam. But Allah SWT did mention him, and that's why we must believe in these prophets that he has named. Same thing with heaven and hellfire. These are things that Allah, if He did not mention, we would not be required to believe in them. So those are things that He affirms. There are also things that He negates in the Quran. For example, He negates the reality of Isa alayhi salam dying. The Christians believe, that He died, but Muslims do not believe that He died. So He negates certain possibilities as well. We again take these as face value. So if Allah affirms something or negates something, this is something that we accept. Then there are other things that Allah does not mention about at all. Here we do tawaqquf. We cannot make anything in this category a religious issue. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't talk about dinosaurs. He doesn't negate dinosaurs. And He doesn't affirm dinosaurs. So what is the Islamic position of dinosaurs? Wallahu a'lam, we don't know. It has nothing to do with us on the Day of Judgment. If you personally believe in dinosaurs, it has zero effect on you on the Day of Judgment. If you negate dinosaurs, if you don't believe they exist, khalas. Again, there will be no implications of this on the Day of Judgment in the Akhirah. And that's where tawaqquf comes in. If Allah SWT does not mention anything about ilm al-ghayb, we do not need to make it a religious issue. Bas. That's it. Finally, when you have equally valid interpretations and they all have weight, then you should not force one interpretation above the other. Imam Ghazali, he makes it very clear in his Faisal that Tafriqa, that if you have multiple interpretations and they're all jaiz, do not force one, because in Yawm al-Akhirah you will be questioned for that by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is not something you want breathing down on the Day of Judgment on you, because it can have negative consequences for you. So if there are options open, keep them open. Keep them open. So these are the 5 measures that I use. Now, given these rules, what am I as a Muslim committed to? I believe that given these hermeneutic principles, I believe in a historical Adam as a real person. I believe the historical Eve is a real person. I believe they're miraculous creations. And I believe all of us, all humans today, we linearly go back to these two. Yani we have a nasb with these two individuals. I believe that these are non-compromisable. If you are a Sunni or Shi'i, both Sunni, Shi'i, Muslim, you must believe in these principles. What am I not committed to, however? I am not committed to having any belief about when he existed, because Quran and Hadith are silent. I do tawaqquf on this issue. What coexisted? Yani what ashbah or bashar were there at the time of Adam alayhi salam? Again, I don't know. See, what interactions? Did they marry? Did they interbreed with one another? Again, wallahu a'lam. I have no commitment to this issue. It could have happened, it could not have happened, wallahu a'lam. So, given these things that I am committed to and I'm not committed to, scripturally speaking, I have no problem accepting creationism. I have no problem accepting human exceptionalism. I have no problem accepting Adamic exceptionalism. However, I have a problem with no exceptions, because the readings of all the ayat referring to Adam salam are too strong to be overread with a majazi reading. So putting it all together, metaphysically, all of these positions are jaiz. Scripturally speaking, I believe that creationism, human exceptionalism, and Adamicism are jaiz, but not no exceptions. No exceptions, I think, would have problematic implications, at least from a theological angle. And that is the end of my presentation. I thank you very much for listening to me. I'll hand it over back to Rozabite for any questions. Barakallah feek. Shukran for listening to me.
All right, thank you very much, and particularly because you are not feeling very well, and despite that you made time for us and you did that presentation. So now I'll open it up for question and answers. I'll just ask some like really basic questions just to begin this conversation, and then people with a lot more knowledge than me can ask like more serious questions. So it's a question on Asharism. For between the Asharis and the Mu'tazila, there was a big debate on this issue of miracles, right? And Asharism then came up with the idea of occasionalism as to somehow kind of keep that power within the laws as well. I mean, when I look at it, it feels like a hack job. I mean, it does not fill me with a lot of confidence that they've done a good job over there. And there's also this sense that it's too untestable, too broad. So it just captures everything, and as you showed, it takes all the boxes. How do you feel about it? I mean, you've mentioned that you subscribe to it, but do you feel this is a good enough explanation?
Yeah, so I can see why some people might be dissatisfied, because it keeps everything open. Sab kuch khula, as you indicate, right?
Sab chalta hai.
Lekin that's the point. This is assuming that the function of theology is to give you all the answers. The function of theology is to get you to heaven. That is the maqsad of theology. Aqeedah's maqsad is to get you to heaven and to save you from hellfire.
Yeah.
Its purpose is not to give you the answers and the details of the world. Surah Al-Kahf, what is the main lesson of Surah Al-Kahf? To understand that you will not have every single detail down to every resolution. But the function of theology is, ये आपका limit है, ये filter है, ठीक है? जो भी scientific idea आपके सामने, put it through this. If it passes, khalas, accept it or reject it. If you don't want to, khalas, reject it. It's up to you. Lekin it will not give you or force answers, because then you're saying something that Allah Himself has not expressed.
Right.
So that's why some people get a little bit upset. Why are you supporting creationism? I criticize creationists, but I still support creationism. Because Allah SWT did not rule that out. But Mac who can close it out.
Yeah. And with creationism, as I think you mentioned in one of your videos somewhere else, that everybody can subscribe to creationism, because we can say that at the end of the day everything is created, right? So creationism technically covers everything.
Creationism has two meanings.
Yeah, of course.
Broad meaning of creationism, Allah created everything. This is creationism in general. Okay? Evolution ke andar lekin creationism has a specific meaning, khas meaning. It means that common ancestry is false.
Right.
That's what it means. I
Yeah,
am speaking in this very specific narrow sense, not the
of
broader
course,
sense.
of course.
Yeah.
Cool. Just a quick question, and then I'll hand it off to other people. uh, within Quran, when the story of Adam is discussed, right, we hear this objection from the angels that human beings are going to cause, bloodshed and chaos on earth, and some people use this idea of that other beings are already present before Adam was selected as the Khalifa
Uh-huh.
of, to kind of support this, that is what the angels were basing it on, that it was already there, it was kind of showing you how these beings are going to behave. What do you think about that?
मतलब possibility hai, I don't deny that possibility. Is it قطعي? No, it's dhanni, it's a possibility. So
Yeah.
when the angels said, they saw Adam alayhi salam and they said, are you going to create something that will cause mischief and fasad on earth, right? And
Mm.
bloodshed on earth.
Yeah.
So some people say, how do they know that this by looking, then it leads to corruption, fasad? Perhaps there was something similar on the ground.
Mm.
Some riwayat say that this is just out of curiosity that the angels asked. Some say that it could be jinn because we know that jinn existed before Adam, before human beings. But maybe in light of evolution, maybe it could be referring to ashbah al-bashar. Wallahu alam, could be.
Right. Okay. So yeah, that's a reasonable explanation, or is a reasonable answer. So Ahmed, you put your question in first, so I'll give you the first opportunity. Do
Sure.
you want to go ahead with it?
Sonic Ahmed.
Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam. Could you just show the picture of the Adamic exceptionalism, the tree that you showed with the
Yes,
multiple possibilities?
yes, sure. A second, yeah. Okay, I've done it. Oh, here you go. Adamic or human, bro?
Adamic.
Yeah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Yeah, here we are.
Yeah, this one. So, right. I had the question. So we know that the endogenous retrovirus. So we already concluded that metaphysically it's possible that these endogenous retroviruses just they match up for no reason. But isn't that sort of like, let's say if we go to the 7 million years ago, if I say the homonym ancestor that was Adam, okay,
Yep.
wouldn't that be more, because it fits with the genetic issue, your retroviruses are solved, but then you have the issue of, okay, some Bani Adam are chimpanzees. So what level of skepticism with the endogenous retroviruses can we uphold? Because then when you are this skeptical, then someone can, like the creationist argument of the radioactive decay, that it's just 6,000 years old, the radioactive decay you have, it wasn't always this way, that's just why your half-life calculations are incorrect. So how can someone, without falling into cognitive dissonance, allow this much skepticism into science when it's basically all we know?
So, what exactly is the question here? Like, how far back can Adam be? Is that your question?
Yeah, how far back can he go? And if you say that he doesn't go so far, because I understand that it's metaphysically possible for God to create a miracle, but
Yeah.
how is that how can that doesn't seem reasonable still, that if he did create him, then why use the same? If you think of endogenous retro, if you think of them as a staple on the DNA, then how can you have the same? Why would you create it this way? Isn't it deceptive?
Right. Okay. So, why would it be deceptive for God to do miracles?
No, it's not deceptive for him to do miracles, but
Yeah.
it does seem deceptive to say that we know how endogenous retroviruses are inherited from father to
Sure.
son, mother to son.
But
So
if you so Adamic exception says that there's only two people that were created miraculously, and if their genes mix up with what's out there, why would that be any kind of deception? It's the same with Isa alayhi salam.
hmm.
He was born
How would
without.
their genes mix though?
Well, we don't. Do you know the genetic profile of Adam alayhi salam?
No.
No, neither do I. So it's a cooked question both ways. How did Allah do it? I don't know. Maybe it was a miracle. Maybe it was not a miracle. Maybe the genetics were already quite similar in order to have reproductive success. Again, open-ended question that theology cannot answer for you. Is it
Right.
in the realm of possibility that there was an exceptional case where you have two beings and their descendants mixed with others? That's it. Rest is all speculation.
Mhm.
And
Right.
that's where the theological, approaching this from a theological aspect, for me, makes it crystal clear. Ultimately, I don't care about those details. They don't matter to me on the day of judgment. If you want to figure out, if you want to find out, like, how would that work out, yeah, you can go ahead and do that. Perhaps, you can do some scientific simulations to see if two people can lead to genetic, without bottlenecking, it can lead to
Mm.
some kind of genetic diversity that we see today. Great, fine, that's possible. But theologically, couldn't care less. I mean, like,
Right.
I have bigger things, bigger fish to worry about, like my akhirah, for example.
Sure.
You know,
That's fine. But then you talked about people who just take these stories as metaphor.
yeah,
And you said that the verses are too strong to be metaphor. But isn't
yeah.
the whole point of majaz that it seems very strong and it seems realistic? Because some people would say the story of Adam, to tell everyone that they just came from one man and one woman, is to stop tribalism, stop prejudice, inna khalaqnakum qabaila wa shu'uban, that ayah. Why do you think it's necessary to take scripture meant for specific people so literally for us today?
So this is the scriptural mechanics of the school that I follow. I mean, if you follow a different school of thought, you can occupy something else. For example, Ismailis believe that Adam is light. Like, there is no, like, a single figure. Like, there were human beings for eons, right? So if you're an Ismaili Muslim, okay, be an Ismaili Muslim. I just make it crystal clear that I adopt things literally. Now, this is not a blanket rule. Like, for example, the Quran mentions Allah has hands, but we know that Allah is beyond time, beyond space. How do you deal with that? Again, I deal with that in chapter 9 of my book, where Ghazali has very specific discussions about how do you go from literal to non-literal. And I didn't go into that detail just for the sake of simplicity. But those conversations have been taken care of in all schools of thought. All schools of thought. But I personally I take things literally unless I need to do so. That is just generally my disposition towards the Quran Hadith.
Okay, that's good. Okay, thank you very much.
No worries.
All right, thank you. So next question. You've got more questions, Emma. Do you want to continue them, or should I move on, or you want to come back later?
I think I've asked all of them in two questions. I think
All
it's
right, cool. So Mushfiq is raising his hand, so I'll give him an opportunity. I'll wait for Junaid as well, because I'm hoping that he can further
Assalamu
dissect.
alaikum, Doctor.
Well,
My question is with regards to the parentage thesis of Adam and Eve. Like, what parts of the Quran, for example, or scripture, in the Ashari perspective, bind or confine you to say that Adam and Eve might not have had non-human parents, for instance, and that two people from a chain or the progeny would have been breathed in with the Spirit of God Almighty and given human consciousness, for example.
So for me, it's the main ones are the two verses that I mentioned earlier on. The one in Surah Nisa and Surah Imran. There are also some hadith where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says He created Adam from dust, literally from dust, right? He collected earth from various parts of the world and then created Adam as salam. So for me, all of those collectively, I find it difficult to read it otherwise. That's mostly my stance. So I mean, like, if I were to put myself in a box, I'm mostly a conservative. In Aqidah, I'm a conservative Muslim. So I don't want to go against conservative opinions. And if I can safeguard the traditional opinion, but just adding the possibility that in Adam's descendants could interbred, khalas. So I don't have a problem with that. I don't see the need to read it otherwise.
Yeah, but doesn't this ayah that Adam was created from dust kind of lend itself to more metaphorical interpretation, because you can't really say, well, he was literally created from dust. I mean, of course, from a point of view of miracle, from a point of view of miracle, you can say anything.
If you believe in miracles, Ya masla.
No,
I've got
no problem at
animation.
all. Yes,
Allah
yes.
تفضل
No, no, but
قصة.
then we were talking about basically what I'm trying to say is that there are things in Quran which lend themselves to more metaphorical interpretation rather than more literal. And saying that Adam was created from dust is, it seems to me, is something that can be taken as more metaphorical. And also the words that Allah said be, and it was. I mean, Allah says that about the, let's say, the universe as well and other things as well. So yeah,
Can I interrupt you?
yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I was not speaking about metaphorical meaning. I was saying about literal meaning. I mean, does the literal meaning of the two verses that you present conclusively eliminate the possibility that Adam and Eve would not have had parents at all, or they were created, like, for example, in a crude sort of a notion that a statue was created, and then Allah breathed some spirit into it, and it became human being. Or
Yeah,
not
so
that, for example, creating from dust could also mean that the origin was, of course, dust, but it need not have been a statue created, right? That kind
yeah.
of a thing.
So I think I mean, like, there are hadith to the effect that there was a statue created and even jinn went around the vessel. Like, what is this thing, right? And Allah blew the ruh, right? So those are still Adamic exceptions in the sense that they don't have a mother and father. In Surah Nisa, there was a debate. There were two opinions about the creation of Eve. One opinion was that she was created min nafsin wahida, khalaqa min nafsin wahida, right? There are two interpretations of this. One is that she was created a part, literally a physical part of him, the rib, for example, according to one weak hadith, right? The other one created in the same sur as him, in the same image as him. But both of them are linked with Adam alayhi salam to some extent. Those are the two meanings there. The creation of Adam alayhi salam's miraculous creation comes from Surah Imran, particularly in light of the sabab that I mentioned earlier. That if Isa alayhi salam is considered miraculous for you, then here we have an individual. And this was the standard interpretation for like thousands of years. So that's why I don't interpret any other way. Now, if there is a creative scholar that can confine, to the Arabic and the Qarina is maintained, khalas, great. I would love to see that interpretation. I haven't seen that yet.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Junaid, I saw you taking a bunch of notes. Do you want to
Yeah,
pick up?
I have taken notes, but it's I was more interested to listen to what he has to say about it, and I've read some parts of the book, and I am looking forward to read the whole book actually. So today I was just here to understand what he believes in, and to understand his thesis. As far as our work is concerned, it is. There are certain overlaps. First of all, we also keep our scientific part separate and theological part separate. And as far our hermeneutics are concerned, they are Frahian, coming from Imam Frahi from Sunni,
Yeah.
theological perspective, yeah. And there are some fundamental differences concerning how we interpret certain verses that Dr. Saib was alluding to. For example, this verse of Nafsin Wahida, we do it in Samakshari way. We think that he was from the same species. And there is another ayat in the Quran also which alludes to that. But the problem here is that we need a whole presentation of our own in order to fully build our arguments regarding this, because there's one main difference between the asul that you have given for Ghazalian hermeneutics and ours, and that we believe Quran to be unequivocal. We don't believe that the Quran can have two meanings. Any verse can have two meanings. It is our understanding which can be lacking, but there are, as you were talking about textual context and the karina also. So it is we who sometimes at places cannot make up our mind, but the Quran is not double in meaning and stuff. So I'm just commenting because it's difficult to. One thing I can come to question also. Do you want me to be brief? But I just wanted to give an overview of our way of doing things. First is that we keep science part different, and the other is that in interpretational part we keep Quran Majid as the source, and we are trying to directly interpret it. it's, of course, it doesn't mean, and I'm not trying to say that we are standing on a higher ground or something like that. It's you have already, opened up this discussion by saying that I really appreciate it. It's just like this, because I also put out Imam Farahi's name. It's just that there are some basic principles, of course, that you have to spell out, and Imam Ghazali is not as important as those principles in a bigger perspective, in rational and logical perspective. So that's absolutely all right. And so one thing is that we differ in our interpretation of ayat, and the other thing is that where the scientific part is concerned, there we, at least I am trained in, I'm not a hardcore biologist, but I have done systems microbiology, so something similar to your field. And I have worked with evolutionary biologists and studying on bacteria and stuff like that. So in the science part where evolution is concerned, I have been, um I've been reading the literature along with some geneticists and some colleagues, so that we can have a comprehensive, view in front of us. So the one thing that I found lacking in evolutionary, there are two things basically which are lacking as far as evolution is concerned scientifically. One thing is that they make big jumps. They make extrapolations, big extrapolations. And I've seen in your book that you have a very good understanding, and you have read all this literature. You yourself are trained in science. So I would just cut it short for that reason. One is that they make big jumps, and there's a lot of extrapolation. And the other point, which is really the gist of it, is that I think this evolution by random mutation, I think it is a plausible explanation. And by saying that, I think it's a very good hypothesis. But is that hypothesis, so to speak, proven considering the scientific method? I don't think so. That is because in order to do that, we obviously need evidence, and evidence is one, experimental evidence, and the other is observational evidence. So if I just try to get to gist of that, consider like the organ eye or any other organ. Eye is the organ that Darwin himself gave the example of, and Darwin said that this complex organ can be built step by step by this and that mechanism. Of course, with genetics and random mutation being the cause, we have moved ahead. But the problem is that in order to build the eye, does it seem plausible that random mutation, because random mutation is basically the error part is the basic part which comes into the debate. Of course, the DNA can change through many means, but the main part is, as you have explained, through reproduction. So these random mutations, we need to show either experimentally or observationally that here this genotype change is occurring. You have also talked about genotype and phenotype in your book. This genotype change here is occurring, and this is the phenotype. So step by step, an organ is building. So that would be like, this is the mutation that is happening now, and this is the result. And step by step, progressive development of eye or male or female sexual organ or any other part. So there is data, similarities, yes, there are. Like one organism, more simple or a simpler eye, and more complex eye. Yes, it is there. It seems as if both have come from the same source. Like it's the origin of species from a common ancestry seems all right. But the problem is that, is the random mutation the only source of that? And this chancing mutation also, raises our consciousness to the point that maybe it is this is chance of the gap, just like God of the gap. This is chance of the gap. Maybe there is some, because for one random mutation occurring and in the building of eye, that's okay. But for eye to build, or for some complex structures to build, we need sometimes 4, 5, 10, 12 mutations at the same time. So this mechanism that they are postulating, it starts to seem less plausible there. And is it the only mechanism? And chance here is the only mechanism. I think we don't know.
So
Honestly, I think
Junaid,
we
just
don't
for
know.
my clarification, you're raising a more of a probability question there, because there are multiple things that need to happen just to get to a particular point. But the example that you are using of the eye, you are not in any way, let's say, referring to the intelligent design argument of irreducible complexity or any of those things.
No, it doesn't. I mean, taking the name wouldn't help us much. The problem here is with the basic criterion of something being science or non-science.
Okay.
The problem here is that we don't have the evidence here, demonstrable evidence that look a step-by-step progressive just by chance. And by the way, people have had this argument that evolution is a slow process, it takes a long time. But now we also have bacterial studies, 25, 30 years of bacterial generations, and we have because it is artificial breeding of bacteria, so we have fastened that process millions of times. There are so many generations, but we still can't document. There are interventions through humans for which we have been able to make bacteria do certain things, but otherwise random mutations on their own, the problem is that there is no evidence for that step-by-step building. This is the purely the scientific part in which I think the theory lacks, and in which we need to
so maybe let's just ask Dr. Shoaib, how do you feel about these gaps?
So first of all, thank you, Junaid Bhai, for your response. I appreciate it. I look forward to your book about through Farai's perspective. If you ever do a presentation, please invite me. I would be very interested in attending. So that's the first thing. As for about whether evolution is by random mutations or not, though मैंने किताब में भी लिखी है कि right now there's a debate amongst evolutionary biologists about the mechanisms of evolution. Some people, they are in the neo-Darwinism camp कि yes, it is only natural selection and random mutation. बाकी लोग कह रहे नहीं, there might be other mechanisms that have maybe more of a goal-oriented process attached to them. ठीक है? Both of these are there. From a theological point of view, Allah can do both. So this for me is not a theological conversation, and therefore not interesting for me, personally speaking. This is a scientific debate, and leave it to the scientists. But I make it crystal clear that whichever option, it's jaiz. Either way is jaiz. So for me, I don't have any more interest in that. That's it.
You are enjoying too much freedom there, Doctor. I don't like this. I don't like this. It's like the string theory guys. They have just far too much going in their favor.
अच्छा, एक और point, जुनैद भाई, तो आपने कहा था कि evidence नहीं है, ठीक है? तो in the theological model that I occupy, at least, I can even entertain something theologically even if there is zero evidence for something. मतलब देखिए, for example, multiverses. Multiverses, वो जो दो सवाल थे जो मैंने पूछे थे पहले, is it metaphysically possible? Is it scripture compatible? ठीक है? वो दोनों पूछ रहे हैं इनके बारे में. Is it metaphysically possible? Can Allah create multiverses? See the jawab, yes. It's Allah's qudra, yes, it's possible. ठीक है? Is there anything in Quran, Hadith that negates multiverses? No. So you can believe it and you cannot believe it. It's up to you. आपकी personal opinion है. लेकिन there is zero evidence for multiverses right now. Zero evidence. So even if something has zero evidence, you can still do your theological explanation.
But Dr. Shoaib, you have to give us, some sort of concrete point of view so that we can declare you kafir, because, it's like you're not giving us anything. You're just happy with everybody.
Can I?
Actually, I really like his approach. It's good to be, because he is just standing on concrete grounds, theologically also as well as scientifically. So I really like this approach. But the thing is that where the science is concerned, first of all, I mean, of course, I agree with him fully that even if this is scientific part, that's why I said the scientific part should stay separate from theological part. So scientific part, if it is lacking, if it is not lacking, either way, if there is a mechanism, as you said that, I mean, as far as I have read this literature, more and more people are talking about actually nobody likes to question it. It's just like very popular. It's the whole, it's understandable also. The whole biology is based on that, and there are so many postulates within this theory, and the evidence is also mixed up. For example, the evidence for common ancestry is taken to be evidence for random mutation to be the cause. Actually, the cause can be debated, and
Right.
whether the cause can be debated or not, or whether there's a mechanism, in either way, God has no restriction to be, you know, in this
Right.
process.
Yeah.
And one thing that you have also talked about, like you have mentioned intelligent design, and we don't want to go there. We don't want to put God there, you know, in the chance or in the mechanism, because we actually that's a very weak position. First of all, we don't want to put God in the gap. I mean, God is in whole of the universe, from the basic building block to the highest of to consciousness and whatever.
No, well, I think Dr. Shoaib referred to it when he talked about naturalism and how it's kind of the ruling metaphysics of this approach, right? So, and I would go so far as to say there's a degree of politics behind it as well. It's not just the philosophical approach that this is all about, right? So there are, you know, bigger reasons to champion just one view and not have like a more open discussion on this. Mushfiq, did you want to say something?
Reza,
No,
I just wanted to complete it.
Go ahead,
That would be my last point. It is that from within the Quran, that's where the debate gets very, very interesting. We have spent so much of time with our Ustad Ghamidi also. We had 28, 29 sessions on evolution, and we were, because I was completely for evolution. I was convinced, and during the discussion there came scientific, you know, questions and this questions on Quranic interpretation also. So in our interpretation, particularly where Surah Sajda is, it tells us clearly that Adam and Eve had their parents, had ancestors. It's not like, because the verses, if I can very briefly refer to them, and then I would come to other verses, because but these verses are really important. وَبَدَأَ خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ طِينٍ, आगाज किया इंसान की तख्लीक का उसने मिट्टी के खुलासे से, ثُمَّ جَعَلَ نَسْلَهُ مِنْ سُلَالَةٍ مَّاءٍ مَّهِينٍ, फिर चलाई उसकी नस्ल हकीर पानी के खुलासे से, just saying in Urdu as well, because we all are familiar with this language. ثُمَّ سَوَّاهُ, फिर उसका तस्वीया किया, وَنَفَخَ فِيهِ مِنْ रूही, और उसमें अपने लतीफ फूंक में से फूंक दिया. So this, if you take it chronologically, systematically, so God created you know, insan or Adam, the first human being, and then he reproduced that through nutfa, and then nafkharu is coming later on. So reproduction process has begun.
Right.
So that's why we interpret this verse to say that, and this you would, I have and I have an article on that also, which is a bit crude at the moment, but anyway, you're familiar with Urdu. You can read this view if you are not already familiar with it. You can read it in Maulana Islahi's tafsir. He has detailed it over there, and in Ghamadi's tafsir also. So that's why first point is that we believe that he had ancestors, and the other point is that this the similitude between Jesus and Adam, we also take it literally, like, but we don't interpret it in the way that or Ustad, because I'm not a theologian, I'm not well versed with the language of the Quran either. So the similitude, the likeness is not between the process. The similitude or the likeness is the miraculous creation of Adam and the miraculous creation of Jesus Christ. So I have now taking all these points, and Nafs Bahida I have already explained to you, like Zumukhshari is interpreting it, we are interpreting in the same way, that it is from the same species, the wives. Like in another verse, it says that your wives are from within you, in the same the same language structure. And here it says that Hawa was created from the same. It means that from the same species as Adam. So when we put all these pieces together, we have also a coherent picture of what the Quran is saying. And then there are a few problems in there. I shouldn't call them problems. I should say that it's not so straightforward that this and the scientific picture and the scientific, I would say, concrete picture, because there are some concrete parts in evolution also, like this is very concrete and the evidence is overwhelming that we share our genetic ancestry with chimps and other similar organ. How did that happen? So I have, like you, like my ustad is exactly like Shoaib Ahmed Malik, Dr. Saab. He is saying that I will not subscribe to any hypothesis,
Yeah.
but because I come from, I'm trained in science as well as philosophy, so because of both, because we are curious and we want to, you know. So I am of the view that at least what I would do, maybe I would do something in between Ustad and what Dr. Shoaib has just done in his book. Dr. Shoaib Malik has done in his book, is that I would spell out the possibility
Yeah.
that there is a possibility how this mingling of DNA has taken place. Uh, but I will not, of course, insist on that, because we have to show that there is compatibility. Otherwise, it seems like there's no compatibility in between the two. So
Right.
I'm
Right.
very sorry
Yeah.
for being,
No worries. No worries. No worries. You were just kind of describing the
I'm,
point of
I'm,
view.
yeah, I'm stopping here because like uh, Dr. Malik, you know that it is you never feel satisfied until you have systematically spoken out your view. So I am
Yeah.
just alal tap tarike se from here there. I've tried to put up the picture,
Yeah.
but we can have a separate maybe discussion if you have time later on,
Yeah.
and that would be great. But the thing is that I want to read your book word for word from the start to the end. I have read some parts. I started systematically, but I had to do some other works.
Yeah.
Once I'm finished, then please give us a chance to have another session with you,
Yeah.
because then I would understand your viewpoint, and then I can share my manuscript with you as well.
Yeah. I mean,
Sure.
I thought I saw so many overlaps or resonance in his point of view and our point of view. Talking about there being conclusive proof in term, textually speaking. Katyu dalala and katyu sabut, right? We take that position as well. As far as I understand, Gandhi Saab's position is of Adamic exceptionalism. And am I correct to assume that Shoaib, you subscribe to Adamic exceptionalism?
So my position is conditional, shart. If evolution is true, believe in human or Adamic. If it's untrue, be a creationist. That's my position.
Right, 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 right. Okay, okay, that's good. Again,
I
very
was I was
factual.
very interested in that also. Yeah, I also wanted you to spell it out like this,
Mm.
and yeah, this has now become a little bit more, yeah.
All right.
So
Okay.
it is, yeah.
So I mean,
Uh,
Mushfiq earlier said that he wanted to say something.
Yeah, I wanted Doc Sub's comment on this. The first point he mentioned was of deep time, that evolution, it rests on this premise, I guess, if I can articulate it that way, that humans are much older than we initially thought. Or am I correct? You can.
so, Mushrif, why deep time? It has nothing to do with humans per se. It's just the scale of time of all existence is much older than
Yes.
6,000 years old.
We
Okay.
just say talking about
What
6,000
about
years, right?
like if since you have taken in this presentation, you said if evolution is taken as correct, okay, we accept that entirely, and what would the implications be? Have you considered the hadith reports which talk of and I'm saying I guess as far as I have studied, they have been graded as authentic, sahih, in, for example, in Ibn Hibban and Mustadrak Hakim, where there's a question put to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that what was the time between Adam and Noah, peace be upon him, and he said something like 10 qarn, or 10 generations, or some people have translated that as 10 centuries. And then there is another hadith narrative, a similar question, the time span between Prophet Nuh and Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. And again, the answer is 10 generations. So in that way, from Ibrahim alayhi salam to our time, it is approximately 4,000 years. So adding 2000 to it, we come up with a figure of 6000 years of human existence and human life on this planet. So would that be then compatible, or how do you put it
So
together?
I spoke to Mufti Muntasir Zaman. So his takhsis is in hadith, like he's a hadith specialist. And I asked him, is there anything through which we can calculate the lineage of Adam alayhi salam? He's like, nothing. There's nothing that is of strong evidence. So for me, even the hadith that you mentioned, I think I came across it, but after speaking to Mufti Saab, as well as even Ibn Kathir mentions tafsir that we have no way of knowing when he existed. So I know that there have been some estimates. For example, Naqib al-Abbas, he has a book called The Nature and Justice of Man. Blue किताब है मलेशिया से, Istak Press if I'm not mistaken. तो उसमें he tried to calculate using inferences, मतलब biblical record के साथ matching थोड़ी सी की उन्होंने. He came up with the year of exactly something like 60 or 7,000 years ago. So if it's a possible guess, I don't know. It can be anybody's best guess. But I don't know is the honest answer. I really don't know.
I mean, wouldn't that easily get?
My question is, if we, for example, for a moment, if we accept that that hadith is authentically reported from Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, what implication would then that have on evolution?
So in that case, so there is a computational biologist. His name is Joshua Swamidass, and he found out, he has a book called The Genealogical Adam and Eve. Bahut achhi kitab hai, excellent book. In there, he found that you can have a universal ancestor for all human beings as early as 3,000 years ago. So the fact that you can have a universal human ancestor even as early as 3,000 years ago is shocking. That's a shocking fact. कि अगर कोई इंसान था 3,000 साल पहले, he can be the father of all of us today. So if Adam alayhi salam was around 6,000, no problem. It could gel with what evolution is saying. No problem.
No, are you saying that
But then,
all the current
there are other
evidence
hadith
actually?
narratives. For example, just let me a moment. There are other hadith narratives which say, for example, that Adam, for example, his height was quite large. His size was large, and he lived for thousands of years. And Prophet Nuh's lifespan is in the Quran, which is Qat'i us-Subut and Qat'i ud-Dalala, that it's 950 years he preached, so it must have been like about 1,000 years he lived on this earth. So and since then there is a narrative which says that progressively the human lifespan and the size of humans has continuously decreased. So like can that happen so quickly, or?
Okay, so I actually did an interview with Mufti Muntasir Saab about this very hadith. He has a book on this that's published. It's called At the Crossroads Between Science and Scripture, addressing the height of Adam alayhi salam. So in his analysis, mashallah, he did excellent analysis. That he found out jo riwayat hai, where it says Adam's height, only a few of them actually mention the number, which automatically removes the strength of the number, the fact there is a number. In addition to that, for example, some ulama did tawaqquf, Ibn Hajar Asqalani, he didn't say how he could reconcile it. These about this, some ulama interpret this as his height in heaven, fis sama. So yahan bhi options hain, or not one of them is absolute over the other. But he says it's very unlikely that his height was actually 60 meters tall. Lekin a kitab padhne, it's a very good book, very detailed analysis of this hadith. Very, very good analysis of the hadith.
What's the name of the book? Can you mention that again?
Ek second, Mufti Saab. So here it is. Ye kitab hai. This The Height of Prophet Adam at the Crossroads of Science and Scripture. Muntasir Zaman.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
All right. So Danish has been waiting for a long time. Danish, do you want to go ahead?
Okay, Assalamu alaikum, Shoaib Saab. I read parts of your book, which were excellent, and I couldn't read the whole thing because it's 350 pages or so long, and I thought I'll spend a Sunday reading it, but it's just impossible. So a lot has been covered already by the other questioner, so I'll just come back to things that I know a little bit about. I was introduced as Dr. Danish. I'm not a PhD yet, but my work is in political philosophy. So the only adjacent subject that I know a little bit about is moral philosophy. So And there's a chapter on moral philosophy, which is incredibly accessible. I mean, the whole book is incredibly accessible, the parts that I've read. And you brought in so many different fields and sort of made a synthesis of them. So it's an incredible contribution. So I want to congratulate you for that. What I want to talk about is a tension that I saw between your Asharite Ghazalian hermeneutic and your Asharism when it comes to especially the question, let's say, of morality, but also of other things. Let me just stick to morality. You say, and this seems to me to be the correct opinion, and this is, I suppose, page 250, which says, collectively, these ideas lead Al-Ghazali to believe that there are no such things as objective or universal morality. And this happens to be, I think, the traditional Ashari opinion. Historians of theology would say that this has to do with certain political views as well, which probably may have led them to position themselves as against the Mu'tazilis and maybe even some other schools which were existent at that time. The problem with that is it, I think, goes against their commitment of accepting the literal meaning of the Quran when it's apparent to them and not going into majaz. So in Surah Shams, we know Allah Ta'ala says, فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. And then he inspired him with the knowledge of good and evil, or you can call it with the knowledge of piety and impiousness or impiety. Now, I don't think how you can put a spin on that, right? I mean, it's difficult to say they at least have some moral sense. Now, you talk about something very interestingly about moral innatism, and I suppose you say that Ghazali does believe that the soul has the knowledge of logic, and it will not logically contradict itself, and it can have, let's say, the ability to universalize logical truths. But there's something else happening here. It's talking about good and evil per se. So this is just an example which I wanted to highlight at some level, at some detail, so as to show that there might be a tension between the hermeneutic and Asharism as an ossified school or a school of theology. So maybe you could take it from here, and I might have a follow-up question.
So the first thing, the Ashari school does not deny Majazi readings. They have no problem accepting Majazi readings. They do ta'wil all the time. So for example, even Ghazali, when Musa alayhi salam encountered Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through that cloud chamber, so Ghazali said the interpretation of the Sufi, throw your two shoes. Ayatana, Surah Taha mein. So Ghazali even said, one shoe throwing from this world, one for the other world. Matlab, you give yourselves to Allah. So that is a Majazi reading. And Ghazali was defending that allow the Sufis to have this. As long as the literal is not negated, we can have Majazi reading. So Majazi reading are not negated. The main thing is that you do not go to Majazi reading arbitrarily for your own whims. That's the key point. So that's the first.
But could you sort of connect this with this particular verse? And I want to see how this happens in practice.
In فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا, this does not necessarily mean iske under there's good and bad, right? The Ghazali, so when it comes to the position of the fitra, whether people believe moral properties are innate or not, there are three opinions on this issue, at least. Ghazali's opinion is that you do not have any moral principles that you are born with, but you have moral making capacity, which gels with that verse, no problem. Absolutely no problem. There's nothing ikhtilafi with this verse. So, but how do you acquire moral principles? By societal conditioning. That is the Ash'ari response. That what we eventually come to believe good and bad is conditioned by our society. You can have one individual that is raised in a cannibalistic society, he will think eating human beings is valid. It's jaiz. His whole life. If you bring another person up in an idea that eating human beings is wrong, that person will believe that in his whole life. This is societal conditioning. So, and lastly, the Ash'aris do not believe, so this picture is known as divine command theory, that there is no universal objectives. Allah commands everything that's good and bad. This is not because they reject Majazi reading. It's because they want to give full power to God. That's the reason why. That is the actual debate between the Mu'tazila and the Ash'ari. The Mu'tazili system believe that there are moral norms that even God has to abide by. So for example, when animals go through suffering, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to give them justice. It is incumbent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give, which is from our perspective shirk, it's kufr, because there's no necessity upon Allah. So for that reason, they adopted this position known as divine command theory. So good and bad has always been whatever Allah commands. If Allah commanded zina to be halal, it would be halal. If Allah commands zina to be haram, it's haram. Khalas. That's Ash'ari divine command theory.
That's Ashari position.
That's excellent. Then see, this is not the. I mean, the dilemma is not between these two heads of the horn or these two heads of the fork. There can be another third option, which is that God himself in his nature is good, and then he accordingly commands the good. So I mean, it doesn't have to be either one of the two forks of the
From
possibility.
the perspective, that's a Christian understanding. That's not an Islamic understanding. Christians have to stress that God is good, and the reason why they say that is because when Adam was in heaven, God created the world with goodness. But when Adam ate from the tree, evil and suffering entered the world. And Christian theology is premised on that because they don't want to attribute evil to Allah. But in the Quran itself, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ مِنْ شَرِّ مَا خَلَقَ. Save us from the evil that you created.
Excellent. But then, that's an argument at Christendom or something, like an argument at Hitler, just because Hitler believed something. So, I mean, we can't believe that. I mean, if the Christians believe this bit of Christian theology is not a problem for us because of the apparent meaning, because the word uses for alhamaha. He inspired them with it. He doesn't say that he allowed them let's say, the possible capacity or talent to universalize norms, right? On the basis of, let's say, one ground norm that they gave him.
Yeah.
So
in moral philosophy, you broadly have divine command theory and natural law theory. You will find both in Islamic thought. The Maturidis, for example, they are inclined towards natural law theory of sorts. Okay? So I'm not saying that this is the exclusive right of Ash'ari and that's it. I don't say that. I say I have no problem believing in the possibility of other framework. In fact, right now I am working on a book where we have 8 intellectual streams: Mu'tazili, Ash'ari, Maturidi, Ibn Sina, the Sufi framework, Shi'i framework, where they give their perspectives on Islam and science. I'm not dogmatic in my outlook. What I'm simply saying is, given Ash'arism, what can you accept? What can you reject? You don't have to accept Ash'arism. I'm not trying to convince anyone to Ash'arism.
Of course. I agree. I mean, I accept that. See, I mean, I'm partial towards the Farai school, but then I didn't bring up this question from the Farai perspective. I brought it up from the Ash'ari commitment that we will accept the literal meaning as long as the literal meaning is apparent, and then we would go to the majaz, right? Because that is the important point. Why would you prefer or why would you privilege the majazi when the apparent tells you something else? That's the tricky bit which I have problems with. And I think you gave your opinion, but then I'm still not convinced, but I see where you're coming from. So this was about the moral bit. I mean, I had a couple of other questions, but now I'm completely, at this time of the night, I can't register much. So I think I've forgotten the other question, but I'll come back to it if it hits me again. So I'll let the panel take over.
No, I mean, we are already almost at time, unless we've got many questions, and depends on Dr. Shoaib having the time available as well. I just wanted to kind of ask one last question from my side. Is there any kind of deliberate effort from your side, Dr. Shoaib, to reduce the tension that exists between, let's say, the scientific community and the Muslim community in terms of accepting their views, or them kind of, mainly, of the Muslim community accepting their views, or making it, or being more flexible about it? Because your framework allows for a lot of flexibility, right? There is not enough kufr in your framework. So is there a deliberate effort on your part to do that?
So in my opinion, what I'm trying to do is simply, I think, start with the education. I think that, like, mashallah, we had a good conversation about theology, philosophy. So everyone here is well read on these ideas. The average Muslim is not. So this is the reason why I'm trying my best to make theology much more accessible to the wider public. The average person doesn't know what is Ash'ari, what is Maturidi, Mu'tazili, etc. तो आहिस्ता आहिस्ता education के साथ the plan is to kind of improve the intellectual awareness of what exactly our Turath, our tradition says about some of these conversations. They don't have to commit to those. I mean, like as I said, mashallah, you guys are working on the Farahi school, which is great. I want to see the outcomes of that. I want to see what is the Farahian response to evolution, for example. लेकिन इसके साथ, in addition to ta'aleem, you need tarbiyah. So the problem is social media fuels a lot of hate more than it does compassion. And I've noticed this as somebody who engages online as well as offline. So the plan is to have, inshallah, a bunch of cohorts and classes and students that can benefit from both, balance both sides, and then be able to take the conversation to new heights. So my job is to just be a teacher. I'm a researcher and an educator, and that's what I'm trying to do as best as I can. For example, we had this conversations in Pakistan. I'm teaching a group about ilm al-kalam, modern philosophy and theology. I told them I'm not a faqih, I'm not a mufti sahib, right? This is just one area that I'm good at, and I will teach you this. After this, you do what you want. So that's I feel my life goal. And I don't believe that one person can be a jack of all trades. I believe that everybody has one specialization. I found my specialization. Iske upar main focus karunga, and I will make this conversation as accessible as possible. Baki jo log ne karna, it is up to them. And that is it. That is what I want to do before I die. Bas.
Right. A very noble goal. But I just wanted to highlight this, that Dr. Shoaib, I think I remember that you said that you have just completed one course that you were running with certain, I think, madrasa students, right?
From IIUI.
Right. And then you are also part of the Madrasa Discourses program as well. Yeah. So he's also collaborating over there, and he is kind of spreading this education and knowledge among the traditional students. And Junaid Bhai here, he is also teaching teaching a course in our Alim program, where he is also giving these kind of scientific education to those students as well, so that they've got a more kind of more rounded perspective on things.
Inshallah. Very good. Excellent. Good job. Alhamdulillah.
Any questions from anybody, or should we wrap it up over here?
I just have two little things.
Yeah.
One is that it's very interesting that we discussed this Ghazali's framework and basically this Ashari thing. And one thing which is very interesting is that Ghazali's occasionalism and this chancy thing in evolution, that I know you would be reluctant to make an explicit statement on that, but that there seems to be a natural compatibility between the two, if I understand occasionalism rightly, because Ghazali in particular is of the view of total direct causation from God at every instance in this universe. So this isn't it very much like there's a natural connection between guided evolution that these Christian scientists believe in and your approach?
So
there seems to be a natural link.
So guided evolution is a specific reference to non-random causation in evolution. So there must be a goal-directedness in the process of evolution. One of the reasons why people don't like Darwinism, they don't like chance. They don't want to see disorder in nature. Okay? So that's why they prefer processes, for example, niche construction, where that. But that has nothing to do with occasionism. Occasionism is that everything is being caused, sustained, and maintained by God. It can appear random to us. It can be random, but it doesn't have to be random. That's the difference. This is a metaphysical picture. This is a scientific picture. These are not the same things. You can call it guided in the sense that ultimately there's somebody controlling everything. So there is some kind of a goal at the end, but not necessarily that is observable to us. The same way when we say, why did Allah allow the Holocaust? Why did Allah allow the killing of so many people? So Allah, same cheese.
So it is sort of an ontological kind of like वो जो उसकी है Saint Thomas Aquinas के जो एक ontological dependency of, and there goes a lot of back and forth between this Muslim and, because Muslim philosophers are in the middle, Aristotle is there, and then I see this is a very important point. The problem is that Danish was also speaking about it. The thing is that there are so many misunderstandings about even within Islam about the different schools. There's so much of misunderstanding. Like this Ghazali would negate this sense of good and evil. But the point is not that. I mean, I was astonished that ये जो लॉजिकल पॉजिटिविज्म के फिलोसफर्स हैं ये भी डिनाई नहीं करते, वो जो ब्लैक स्लेट कहते हैं ये भी पोटेंशियलिटी को डिनाई नहीं कर रहे होते. तो देयर इज सो मच ऑफ यू नो, दैट्स व्हाई इट रियली हेल्प्स. लाइक अगर आपने इसको पिन डाउन किया और उसके उधर से आ रहे हैं तो दैट विल आल्सो एनलाइटन अस.
अगर आप पढ़ें उसके अंदर आई हैव 4 different kinds of interpretations of chance. 4 interpretations of chance.
मैं उसको देख रहा था एग्जैक्टली. मैंने आपकी पूरी किताब को पढ़ना है शुरू से लेके आखिर तक, और वो उसको मैं आज, जैसे दानिश भाई ने कहा कि आई वाज ट्राइंग टू कवर इट, लेकिन कुछ घर में गेस्ट से ये वो मैं उसको कर नहीं सका. और वो थोड़ा सा वैसे भी था कि थोड़ा सा एरिया जिस पे आप you have to concentrate. One last question. Natural evil, do you see it? I mean, you alluded to that, and it seems like it won't be a problem in the framework in which you are working. So natural evil, like मैं जब evolution पर काम कर रहा था तो मैं बाकायदा, डॉक्टर साहब, this is like maybe आप मुझे कहें कि मैं sensitive हूँ या जो भी हूँ, मैं बाकायदा जो मार धाड़ और ये जो अल्फा मेल का कॉन्सेप्ट है कि monkey coming and killing even the offspring of babies of the other monkey and or share वो सारा कुछ, मैं कई दिन रातें सो नहीं सका, और मैं literally I tried at times इस evil को देखकर, तो उसने मुझे बहुत disturb किया. तो लेकिन I mean it is a very disturbing problem, like psychologically. How can you मैं ये जानना चाह रहा हूँ कि आप कैसे आइसोलेट करते हैं, उससे कर पाते हैं अपने आप को.
I just want to add welcome to the club of people who are disturbed by problem of evil.
अच्छा ठीक है, okay. So for me, I actually was I had a problem with people who had a problem from evil. That's what I had an issue with. I had a problem with people who had a problem with the problem of evil, because for me, and this is when I was jahil. I was a cultural Muslim till 21. Maybe 34. I was a jahil Muslim. Didn't know what even Inshallah Bismillah meant until I was 21. Take it. This is my background. So when I started learning about Islam, and people said, "Oh, there's an argument, the moral argument for God's existence." So मैं सोच रहा हूँ यार, what the hell do you mean by moral argument for God's existence? God can create a world जिसमें He commands you to kill your neighbor. That's the kind of God I understand. ठीक है? God, if He wanted to, He could have made He could make drugs halal if He wanted to. ठीक है? मतलब everything bad, He could have made it good. So for me, I never understood why evil was a problem. This is something that if He did, khalas. क्या मसला है इसके बारे में? So now, when it comes to the emotional, psychological side, I think people have to be aware that the philosophical problem is not the same as the psychological one. Psychologically, you have to square yourself with the idea that this life is not Jannah. This life is test. Hayatul ibtila. This is a life of test. तो इसके अंदर मार खाएंगे हर चीज में, पैसे में, फैमिली में. You will get all kinds of problems. ठीक है? Small scale, big scale, every kind of scale possible. And it is in this that you are being tested for the akhirah. Jalaluddin Rumi, he has a very nice saying, which I love. It was a very good psychological response. He said, "In my scars, I found your mercy. In my scars, I found your mercy." So, and I've gone through a lot of hardship, and I realized the benefit of that in years after, why that was important later on. So for me, I don't have an issue with evil. I know that for some, it's more extreme than others. I don't have anything to say to them philosophically. I don't feel that I'm equipped to do that. ठीक है? लेकिन
आपने थोड़ा सा फिलोसॉफिकली इसको भी टच किया कि इसको आपने टेलियोलॉजिकल वो दिया, एक पर्पसनेस दी कि जो evil होती है, यानी आप now you grant this कि ये जो evil हमें नजर आता है इसके पीछे कोई ना कोई पर्पस होगा. I mean, Okay. And last thing is from my side is at least is that ये जो दानिश भी अभी कुछ questions उठा रहे थे, and you have also spoken very clearly about these issues. I think अल्टीमेटली हमें जब ये डिसाइड करना है कि खुदा ताला कैसे हैं, तो ना वो हमने इस्लामिक फिलॉसफी से करना, ना किसी और से. मेरा ख्याल है कुरान मजीद को बेस बनाकर अगर किया जाए तो दैट वुड बी रियली हेल्पफुल, क्योंकि मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि कुरान मजीद में से कुछ ऐसे हम अखज़ कर सकते हैं अल्लाह ताला के. मुझे कैसे लगता है ये आई मीन एज अ ले पर्सन फिर उसमें फ़र्क आ जाएगा. यानी मैं ये सोच रहा था कि खुदा के रहमान और रहीम होने का क्या मतलब है. अब बात ये है कि just वो ज़ाते बहत God as he is, what does it mean that God is merciful? कोई creation होगी तो उसके perspective में वो merciful होगा ना. तो there are the thing is that there can be a layman reading of the scripture, and then there can be philosophical, and जब भी philosophical होती है तब तो हमें बहुत यानी ये this would go way beyond this session के हम इस पर करें. लेकिन आपके और दानिश भाई ने जो questions उठाए मेरा ख्याल है उस पर भी ये बात होती रहनी चाहिए, क्योंकि ये these are really deep important questions.
Yeah, that sounds like a good conclusion to our discussion. I would like to thank Dr. Shoaib for giving us this much time, and I saw so many commonalities. I'm surprised every time you said something, I said we say something similar as well. I think there's more discussion that we can have later if you have time. And as Junaid said that he's going to read your book, and then you two can have a more kind of deeper conversation on that as well. So thank you very much, Dr. Shoaib, for joining us and giving us an overview of your book.
No, thank you very much for inviting me. This was a beautiful conversation. Thank you. I look forward to speaking to you again, inshallah.
May I say that, Shoaib, if this is how you are under the weather, I'm wondering how you are when you're full, all cylinders running. So this was incredible. Thank you for doing this. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. Barakallahu feek.
And thank you, Raza, as well. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you.